beside, besides the fact of how any custodian is handling their duties in regards to the Moorish Science Temple of America right now, I feel that it's imperative that any Moorish American affiliate yourself with the Grand Body and the Grand Sheik who have formed the Moorish Science Temple of America, whether or not it is recognized by a different temple, because there's like so many different temples and they're not all in alignment. But what I'm going to demonstrate in here is the reason that the reason why I believe that is a non-issue, because when you look at the laws regarding how the Moorish Science Temple of America was set up, it seems that it was divinely set up in such a way to prevent any one person or one body from coveting the organization so that it can do the purpose of what Noble Drew Ali said. Even in the oral statements, I would like to preface everything, the notes and the research that I'm about to go to, with the following term. Well, first I want to say this. I am aware that I don't have all the information. I'm aware that I don't have all the information, and therefore, some of what I present could be invalidated when somebody else brings some other information that I wasn't privy to. So I also ask for you to share this, especially with your leadership, because perhaps they can provide me with the information. So if I give any misinformation for not having all the facts, that could be shared with me. So this is nothing to get mad at or upset about. I am going to present some ideas that maybe some Moors may be uncomfortable with, but this is all, again, based off of research, and it's all done in good faith, because what led me to this research is my desire to join the Moorish Science Temple of America, understanding that it's a religious body politic in a nation state, which is, like Noble Drew Ali said, he left us everything we needed to save ourselves, per se, and that is actually part of it. That's what I realized, irregardless of how one may feel about it. Noble Drew Ali in the oral statement says, Allah alone determines the fate of the Moorish Science Temple of America. And I thought that was really profound, because we went through incorporation in 1913, creation, establishment in 1913, incorporation in 1925, then a different type of incorporation as a civics organization in 1926, and then incorporated as a religious corporation in 1928, which was intentionally recorded and established in such a way to continue into future in perpetuity and to not be destroyed, and then so now we get into the future when the prophet's not here, and there's a lot of discourse and disunity, and I've seen specific situations where one body or one individual would try to covet, and I say covet because I'm basically meaning, play a position of pretty much trying to box another person out, strong arming someone out of what the prophet has left for them. That's just the terms I'm going to put it in. So again, I also have found that there are leadership, grand sheiks, who, because of the disunity, have shied away from opening more science temples of America, when in actuality that's what's needed. And it's not so much about the physical building, but you need that unity in that body under the grand sheik, and it has to be a mutual relationship for the purpose of uplifting, following humanity. Because it's kind of like they say, in the Bible and things like that. The way that I understand this is, as things change, we really have to understand now that, of course, you want a temple and a place that you can physically meet, but the temple is not necessarily the building. The Moorish Science Temple of America is nothing more than the Moorish Americans who are members of the Moorish Science Temple of America. This is exactly the way that the body politic, and this the way that it was set up. And I'm going to show you those references as we slide through here. We went through the establishment of the Moorish Science Temple of America in 1913, and then it was incorporated in 1925, and then incorporated again in 1926 with Cook County as a civics organization, and then incorporated as a religious corporation under the Hurds-smiths revised statutes in Cook County once again in 1928. And under this particular recording, that was the one done by a positive act of Noble Drew Ali, an affidavit. And the way that the Moorish Science Temple of America was set up, that it was set up in such a way that it would live on perpetually and that it couldn't be dissolved automatically. It couldn't be dissolved by way of not appointing any custodians. And most importantly, it's been set up in such a way, divinely, I would say, that it cannot be coveted. And when I say coveted, I mean it can't be controlled by someone who wants to control the authority of the temple, maybe by not authorizing another temple or restricting the membership or trying to push old time religion per se. You know, the temple cannot be coveted. And that's kind of what I want to share my findings with the research here, because some people move away from what Noble Drew Ali set up, which is the Moorish Science Temple of America, and they probably do this because they're looking at, you know, they're looking at people, or they may be looking at bad apples or someone who is not operating the right way. So that doesn't exclude you from demonstrating the right way. So for what I'm saying is, for example, in my locality, if there was no Moorish Science Temple of America, or let's just say there was a Moorish Science Temple of America, and I did my due diligence, and I just really felt within my heart that, you know, this body or this organization is not just, or it's just not for me. And if I had other Moorish Americans in my area, or, you know, then we have a duty to form a grand body and establish a Moorish Science Temple of America through whatever the proper provisions or the proper procedure for that is. And that's the part that I'm not completely familiar with, but I'm going to share my research on the subject right here. So we spoke about 1913 establishment, 1925 incorporation, 1926 incorporation as a civics organization, 1928 as a religious corporation in perpetual under Hurds-smiths revised statute. And then today, you know, I hear a lot of people talk about, I have 501c3 here. I want to say not for profit. All right. These are the words of Prophet Noble Drew Ali. I put them right up here on a screen so that you can see them. We organized as the Moorish Temple of Science in 1925 and were legally incorporated as a civics organization under the laws of the state of Illinois, November 29, 1926. The Moorish Temple of Science was changed to the Moorish Science Temple of America, May 28th. Why? In accordance with legal requirements of the Secretary of State of Illinois. All right. So when I see that they incorporated the Moorish Science Temple of America for a not-for-profit, I understand that this is just a legal thing. It doesn't have any impact on the original establishment of the organization. And I'll give you a further example. Let's take the Moorish Science Temple of America, for example. When you look at the affidavit that Noble Drew Ali recorded, let's take a look at it real quick. 1928. And also, so when you're looking at this reference document, and I'm going to have this right at the bottom of here, so you can download it and click everything. You know, everything I'm talking about, I'm going to show you in here. So the Moorish State Booklet, right here, click it. So what I was going to show you here is you look at this affidavit, right? This is the affidavit that Noble Drew Ali recorded in Cook County. But notice it just says, these don't include articles of organization. They just include the basic information, right? With his affidavit on it, with his signature on it. So this doesn't go into the organization and the bylaw of the Moorish Science Temple of America. This is just to establish the religious corporation in accordance with the requirement of the Secretary of State, right? So it was established when he recorded this affidavit. And again, so I'm pointing this to show you, typically when you form a corporation, the corporation has articles of organization, and it may have articles of agreement. There's going to be something that sets out the internal parts of that corporation. And This part is not that part. This part is just the public part of that corporation, and it doesn't dictate the law of that corporation. I think I said that well enough. I hope you guys understand it. Okay, so we're at the Office of Illinois Secretary of State. We're going to do a research real quick on the Moorish Science Temple of America. Boom, continue. Now I already looked at these, so we're just going to keep it real quick. These are old. You see these, there's a couple of different filings in here. Older filings, and then you have the Moorish Science Temple of America, Inc. Let's click the first one. We see the incorporation was 11/29/1926. I'm guessing we can assume that this is the religious corporation that Prophet Noble Drew Ali established in 1926. You see it says active here, right? And then it says Moorish Science Temple of America, Inc. So obviously in 1926, it was just the Moorish Science Temple of America. But what this is showing us is this is the incorporation date, right? This is the original incorporation date, and these are the statutes for which it falls under. So don't be thrown off by this. This is the requirements of the state, right? Just like Noble Drew Ali said, incorporated as a religious corporation because of the legal requirements of the Secretary of State. This is no more than a legal requirement. So, and notice that it's perpetual. So the authority of this organization, the Moorish Science Temple of America, the law of this organization comes directly from within the organization and not external. And that's because of the type of organization it is. It is a religious corporation. It's a body politic, which is an autonomous government within itself. And you can look at all of these, by the way. Let's go back here. Let's look at a more recent one. Once again, you see the same thing. It's just a newer filing, and it's still incorporated in 1926. Now, I'm going to go ahead and clarify this because somebody's probably thinking, as I thought when I first came across this, but there is some temple who incorporated this, right? And therefore, you feel as though, you got to remember, Noble Drew Ali said, Allah alone determines the fate of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Now, let me show this real quick because I think it's an appropriate time to show something else that I have down here. This is something that I found. I'm at Bizopedia, Moorish Science Temple of America trademark information. Now, I don't know who did this trademark either, but once again, I will say Allah alone determines the fate of the Moorish Science Temple of America. So this is kind of beautiful because whoever did this, here's the attorney right here, the way that they incorporated this. Here, see this right here? This was done in 1995. It was done in 1995, and it's collective membership, the Moorish Science Temple of America. Now, again, I don't know the person who done this. I don't know if their intention was to help all Moorish Americans, in our plight, to nationalize and uplift fallen humanity, these things, or was this just something for a small group of Moors? But the way that this thing is set up is remarkable. The Moorish Science Temple of America, United States Patent and Trademark Office. But how is it held? How is this patent and trademark held? It's held as a collective membership. It's for indicating membership in a religious and civic organization in class 200. Let's look at the collective membership, right? So let's look at that. I have the notes down here. I want to clarify this part because somebody's probably looking at this saying, well, they registered the trademark, so they own it. No, this is registered as collective membership. So if you're carrying a card or anything that identifies your person as a member of the Moorish Science Temple of America, this applies to you. They talk about in the Hurds-smiths revised statute where they talk about how the religious corporation holds title to the property. It said it includes the persons or something to that effect. Collective marks generally. Well, you see it's right here, so you can go here and read it. I already put it right here. So a collective, I'm reading right here on the screen. A collective membership mark is a mark adopted for the purpose of indicating membership in an organization, collective group, such as a union, an association, or other organization. Neither the collective nor its members, listen here, neither the collective nor its members uses the collective membership mark to identify and distinguish goods and services. So the Moorish Science Temple of America as a collective membership mark is not used to establish goods and services. And I'm saying this because the person that set this up did this divinely right, so it seems. Rather, the sole function of such a mark is to indicate that the person displaying the mark is a member of the organized collective group. So therefore, displaying the mark, such as on your nationality card, that you're a member of the Moorish Science Temple of America, this is another public record that supports what that accords you to. The autonomy of that organization is already a matter of record. We just really don't really understand the power in the Moorish Science Temple of America yet. And that's what I'm trying to help demonstrate. So the collective membership, and another reason why I want you guys to look at this collective membership, because again, it says the sole function of such a mark is to indicate that a person displaying the mark is a member of the organized collective or group. So it's showing that you're a member of that organized body. That organized body being the Moorish Science Temple of America under the Hurds-smiths revised statute, which is a religious body politic nation state autonomous to the United States of America with treaties. It's on an international setting. So just how you would have, let's say, the United States of America is composed of United States citizens. And if I was a United States citizen and I was saying, me and my family, we are the United States of America. We are the United States of America. You would understand that I'm talking about the citizens or the people of the United States of America being the United States of America. But we also know the United States of America is a government. So it's a collective membership of the people in the government, making it a body politic. I'm just using my own words because we're going to look at the definitions of a body politic. The religious corporation that Noble Drew Ali created in 1928 was a sovereign body politic based on the law then, and then it was enacted in positive law. So let's find it down here. Now look, this is 1963. This law is from 1963. This is the Religious Corporation Validation Act. In any case, now this is after Noble Drew Ali. So what I'm telling you is, you know how we talk about positive law? Well, this is positive law all the way. One, because Noble Drew Ali did this by affidavit. That's an action. That's a positive law. He recorded it in the county, right? And then under the Hurds-smiths revised statute, which was legislated law, and then the various religious organization was ratified right here. Religious Corporation Validation Act. In any case where any church, congregation, or society formed for the purpose of religious worship has filed or caused to be filed prior to the effective date of this act, prior to 1963, an affidavit in the office of the recorder of deeds in the county in which such congregation, in the congregation, church, or society is organized, in which are set forth the name of the organization and the place where located, and in good faith has proceeded to conduct worship services and otherwise to carry out the functions for which form the affidavit may not set forth recitals. See, Noble Drew Ali's affidavit, what? It didn't set forth recitals. Remember, it didn't go into the organization or the body of the Moorish Science Temple of America. So it's telling you right here, it's almost as if this was written directly for him. Maybe he came back and wrote it. Who knows? But it says, which formed, although the affidavit may not set forth recitals, that the trustees were elected or that the corporate name was adopted in the manner provided for by the sections 35 and 36 of an act concerning the corporations approved April 18, 1872, which would have been the original Corporations Act that they were operating under as amended. This is basically saying, even though all of these things weren't done, the incorporation of such church, congregation, or society, and all its acts and transactions which are otherwise legal are hereby declared validated and legal. That's a positive enactment by a legislative body of an affidavit establishing a religious corporation that has been established in perpetual. So it is valid and legal under the statutes of the Hurds-smiths revised statutes. So now you can understand why this is so important, why this can't be done again, why they won't ratify another religious body like this. So now you see when the things that I have highlighted in yellow here are from the Hurds-smiths revised statute. So now this can better help you understand, as I said earlier, the laws, the specific laws that apply to what Noble Drew Ali has set up. So let's go back to the top here to hit some of these other points that we miss here. So let's start here. Before I do that though, let me just hit this one last point about the body politic and the nation state. I just want us to look at these things real quick, because I want all of us to understand and understand why it's imperative that we Moorish Americans join the Moorish Science Temple of America. Just like the United States of America is comprised of United States citizens, the United States of America is a collective of the citizens, the Moorish Science Temple of America is a collective of the Moorish Americans. Moorish Americans are members of the Moorish Science Temple of America, even as United States citizens are members of the United States of America, which the United States of America, under this democratic form of citizenship, there's a Christian fundamental basis. So we're going to say on that democracy or that republic side, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? So there's a religious tied in to that body politic, even as Islamism is the, I guess you would say, faith. We want to be careful when we talk about religion, because we're not talking, because that's the thing. You know, the United States has religion incorporated in the body politic, but you don't see people running around like religious fanatics. Now, unfortunately, a lot of us suffer through forced religion and cultures, European cultures, and learning the bourgeois way of being religious and damning and being dogmatic towards people. And we're carrying that into our behavior when we need to be dealing with civics and the science and all of these other different matters. So anyway, neither here nor there. Let's real quick look at, let's click these links real quick. Let's run through them really fastly. First thing I'll say is this: and upon, this is out the Hurds-smiths revised statutes, and upon filing of the affidavit as herein provided, it shall be and remain a body politic and corporate by the name so adopted. This is referring to the form, upon filing the form of the affidavit filled out by Noble Drew Ali. It says, what I have highlighted here is it shall be and remain. They didn't say that coincidentally. It said it shall be a body politic and it shall remain a body politic and corporate by the name so adopted. So the Moorish Science Temple of America is the body politic incorporated. So now let's go to see what a body politic is. I just clicked this right here in the Bouvier's Law Dictionary. Government corporations. When applied to the government, this phrase signifies the state. So when we're talking about the Moorish Science Temple of America as a government, we're talking about the state of Moorish Americans, right? So we're talking about the nation state, right? Because the Moorish American is the nationality. But you'll see as we read on down. So when applied to government, this phrase signifies the state. As to the persons who compose the body politic, that would be us Moorish Americans. We compose the Moorish Science Temple of America. They take collectively the name of people or nation. So we're Moorish Americans. And individually, they are citizens. So we are Moorish Americans, individual citizens of the body politic. But the body politic itself, the Moorish Science Temple of America, is a collective of Moorish Americans. When considered in relation to their political rights and subjects as being submitted to the laws of the state. What is the state that they're talking about? Again, the Moorish Science Temple of America is the state, because the government of the body politic is the state side of it, right? The rest of it is the body or the collective membership side of it. So that's really what a body politic is. When it refers to corporations, the term body politic means that the members of such corporations shall be considered as an artificial person. So that means the Moorish Science Temple of America is a religious corporation. Us Moorish Americans, members of the Moorish Science Temple of America, collectively are an artificial person under that term, or under that mark, or under that, like we just looked at, under that, under the Moorish Science Temple of America. We are an artificial person because we are a government corporation, right? We are a body politic, and we have to be an artificial person because in that status, we're accorded a different type of national and political status and autonomy, right? So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. Okay. A nation state, a form of political organization, like, right, a body politic, under which a relatively homogeneous people inhabits a sovereign state, especially a state containing one as opposed to several nationalities. Okay, so let's also look at what the Black's Law Dictionary says. This is from the Black's Law Dictionary regarding a body politic. The term is applied to a corporation, which is usually designated as a body corporate and politic. The term is particularly appropriate to a public corporation invested with the powers and duties of government. It is often used in rather loose way to designate the state or nation or sovereign power, or the government of a country or municipality, without distinctly connotating any express and individual corporate charter. That might also be the reason why Noble Drew Ali didn't allude to any specific charter outside of the Quran of Mecca, because he was establishing a body politic. Now, here's another point that I want to mention, something I found in my research. It said that I haven't seen the physical corporate registration with the Secretary of State, but it said that the Vatican City State incorporated in 1929. Now, this is something very interesting that you have to look at. The Vatican City State is an autonomous government within itself, except it's not a nation state. One of the things it's a body politic, but what prevents it from being a nation state is the fact that within the Vatican City State, there are multiple nationalities. Okay? Now, I'm not sure if all the Christian churches out here fall under the Vatican City State. I'm not sure, but it would be something to know and to look into, because there's a Christian church on every corner and we all have Christian names. And I believe these Christian names make you what is known as let's say a Roman citizen, basically. And this goes a lot into what Brother Taj Tariq Bey talked about. He talks about the inquisitions that are still going on here in America through ways of body politics, and various trusts and treaties also are a part of how inquisitions is being used. So here's something I learned about the Vatican City State and why I brought it up, and how this all relates back to nationality. And I do have the reference. Maybe we'll come across the reference. I'm just going to say it right now. I think I have the reference in the in this outline right here. Let's see if I have it. But in the Vatican City State, where did they incorporate? I have it on here. In the Vatican City State, for everyone who doesn't have a nationality in a Vatican City State, you're accorded Roman citizenship. So you have to understand that. So a citizen is a slave, basically. Let's put it like this. Put it in the right proper context. If I understand correctly, Rome had a class system. A Roman citizen was only a slave. Pretty much. It's the same thing that we have today, a form of modern day slavery. But the thing is, you had the opportunity to have a nationality. It was a privilege or benefit accorded on to everyone who does not have a nationality to be a Roman citizen. And that's why it's just a city state. It's not a nation state or a national state, because the people in and Rome have multiple nationalities. It's just something just to point out. So this further shows how Noble Drew Ali completed a package by bringing the nationality. Let's just put it that way, and creating the body politic for it. Okay, now so we're gonna just finish this up and go through this and talk about any points that I hadn't touched. We talked about establishment of the Moorish Science Temple of America in 1913, incorporation in 1925, incorporation as a civics organization in 1926, incorporated as a religious corporation in 1928. Today we have not-for-profits. Along with not-for-profits, I tell you, Allah determines the fate of the Moorish Science Temple of America. And here's another note I'm going to point out on this not-for-profit. And once again, this is under the Hurds-smiths Revised Statute, Section 46C. This is a law from 1913. The successor or presiding officer of any ecclesiastical body, diocesan, or like ecclesiastical officer, shall by virtue of his office be for the time being a trustee of such corporation. You see? So I said don't worry about the term trustee, because that religious officer is a trustee of such corporation in place of his predecessor. And when the office of any other trustee becomes vacant, his successor shall be appointed in the manner provided in the original selection. The number, term of office, and qualifications of trustees of any corporation may be determined by the usages, the customs, the rules, the regulations, the articles of association of that subordinate Moorish Science Temple of America that is being established. Can establish who the grand officer is and the trustee, and the way that they should be appointed, right? So the articles of association, right? Because remember, these are subordinate temples. Remember, when Noble Drew Ali did the Moorish Science Temple of America religious corporation, he didn't establish articles because that, kind of something that we looked at earlier. It's right here. A body politic. It often used in a rather loose way to designate the state or nation or sovereign power or the government of a country or a municipality without distinctly connotating any express and individual corporate charter. You see that? So this is not the corporate charter for subordinate temple, whatever, or the other subordinate temple or this subordinate temple. Those would be individual corporate charters. And those individual corporate charters can have articles of organization, articles of agreement, whereby they establish the bylaw, right? Just for organizing purposes, and then we know the grand sheiks are the lawgivers. So, getting back on track here, that's why I was saying it was been set up in such a way that it could not be coveted, because there's a 501c3, it's just meeting the Secretary of State requirements for the original religious corporation incorporated by affidavit that remains a body politic. So it's still remaining. So I'm with a body of Moorish Americans, and we've all proclaimed our nationality. And for different reasons, we're in Alaska. Let's just put it that way. So there's so many different hurdles, and we have to establish a temple. We have an adept among us, somebody who's already been, a grand sheik somewhere else, or however. I'm not here to determine what the qualifications of a grand sheik should be, because to be honest with you, I really don't know. And I would like that information. If somebody could share that information with me, I would appreciate that. But I don't know what the qualifications are. Without knowing the qualifications, just solely going on the Hurds-smiths Revised Statutes, which is not solely what we would go upon, I would presume that any qualified body of Moorish Americans, if the state required it, could appoint a Grand Sheik for that body, and then they would just subject themselves to the Moorish Science Temple of America. Now, the way that you would do that is you would incorporate in your local state as a foreign corporation. You know what I'm saying? As a foreign corporation, a foreign trust, a foreign association. You have to do the research on that. But the thing that you have to understand is if you was in Alaska, you would be incorporating in Alaska as a foreign association or foreign something. And then on that paperwork, so here's the key. How would you do that? Well, all you have to do is you bring in your articles of organization or your articles of incorporation or whatever type of articles the state requires, and you have to bring in a certificate of good standing from the original jurisdiction, right? So in this case, it'll be what Noble Drew Ali said the new Mecca would be Chicago, right? So you will go get the certificate of good standing for the 501c3 because for the not-for-profit, because had it not been incorporated in a not-for-profit, then you wouldn't be able to get the certificate and you wouldn't be able to establish true subordinate temples that connect directly to the religious corporation that Noble Drew Ali set up in 1928. Actually, before that, the Civics Organization in 1926. And again, you know it connects if you followed this video from the beginning, because even when you look at the not-for-profit, the Moorish Science Temple of America, Inc., what you find is that it shows the original filing date, and the trust doesn't come, the power of the trust doesn't come from how it's registered or how it's filed or how it's indexed. The power of the trust comes from the trust agreement, and that's it. So that being said, I hope you caught all that. That's how you basically do that. Now, so I just said that, and I said I hope that falls on the right ears, because you could obviously take that information and become a renegade. You understand what I'm saying? So since you heard the information here, I also I also share this with you. If push came to shove and that was what you had to do to establish a temple, you first should write a letter, open dialogue, start communications with multiple grand sheiks and grand bodies to get a consensus for what you're trying to do. And if you really want some more information on how to do that, contact me. As you see, I've done a lot of research on this. I'll be going on and on and on because I'm not even really done with this, and I'm still not done dropping all the information on my research. But so you can contact me. Y'all can get at me. My email address is coaching@thctrust.org. Again, I welcome you to share this with your grand bodies, share with your grand sheiks, and share with me the other information that I don't know. Specifically, what I want to know right now is, are there any absolute mandatory black and white requirements before one can call themselves a grand sheik, or before one can be appointed by a grand body as a grand sheik, or before one can be appointed as a grand sheik from another grand sheik that has been appointed directly from Noble Drew Ali? Is that also a requisite? So because remember, Noble Drew Ali also said that Moors will be born with their eyes wide open. So what if you have a Moor that was born with their eyes wide open, the epitome of what Noble Drew Ali seen in his head, in Alaska somewhere with a whole bunch of Moors? Is there any circumstance from stopping that adept from starting a Moorish Science Temple of America? I would love to hear some answers to these questions. I'm going to take a deep breath here, and we're going to go on through and just read everything else that's highlighted. So we're right here. Do we have to look up no, we're not going to look that up. So here's things directly out of the Hurds-smiths revised statutes. You see all these laws are prior to 1963. They're all prior to when Noble Drew Ali recorded the affidavit to establish the religious corporation, and they're all prior to the ratification. So they're all a part of the perpetual Moorish Science Temple of America. The first thing I have here is Section 38 of the revised stat, it says a failure to elect at any time, excuse me, let me read that again. A failure to elect trustees at any time shall not work a dissolution of the corporation, but the trustees last elected shall be considered as in office until their successors are elected. You know what I'm saying? So can't say that the body politic nation state, or that the state of the nation is dissolved because there were no trustees. The last trustees are in effect until new ones are elected. That's again leads to think, well, a body can elect, their leader, the Grand Sheik. A grand body can elect the Grand Sheik if they're Moorish Americans, because it's Moorish Americans that comprise the Moorish Science Temple of America. Again, we do need for a consensus, and I know many ways that can come about. A consensus is a legal process. And it starts with an affidavit. It starts with an affidavit, a notice, giving someone notice, and recitals. The recitals are your whereas statements, and they don't really necessarily have to be whereas, but they have to be the facts supporting the action that you're going to take, that you're giving them notice of. You give them time to rebut, consent, agree by silent acquiescence or whatever. Once you get the votes, or you get the consensus, if it accords that you can do what you set out to do, then you record that specific affidavit of organization, and you establish that organization. You'll understand more what I'm talking about as we get into here. But what I'm saying is, you do your process and you get your consent first, because the only way that you can be subject to the Moorish Science Temple of America is in record, because the Moorish Science Temple of America of 1928 is perpetual. It exists, but in record. So even your consent, even your subordination to that organization has to exist. How? There's no way for it to exist except for as a matter of fact on the record. So how do you do that? That's why you go to the Hurds-smiths revised statute, because they laid out the process. They laid out the law. It's not even a process. This is the law. It's been enacted into positive law. They laid out the process for incorporating a subordinate temple or a subordinate organization, under the Moorish Science Temple of America of 1928. So, just to round it up, what I'm saying is, in the state that you're at, you'll have to record articles of incorporation, articles of organization, and you would be looking to do this for a foreign trust or a foreign association. The entity would be foreign. The state will also require a certificate of good standing. So I don't think you'll have a problem if the temple that you were incorporating was a Moorish Science Temple of America. Now, when we say subordinate temple, I believe that term, to be put in context, is subordinate to the temple that Noble Drew Ali incorporated in 1928, which does not exist in any physical building. It is perpetual. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't end. In buildings, they erect and then they become demolished. So I make the argument that your subordinate temple to the Moorish Science Temple of America. So you take your certificate of good standing, your articles of incorporation for your Moorish Science Temple of America, subordinate temple, whatever, and you should be able to incorporate as a foreign corporation, receive your certificate of authority. And you should be tied into the original, 1928. And how does that happen? By way of the certificates. You know what I'm saying? And this probably is, again, why Noble Drew Ali said that Chicago would be the new Mecca, because that is like the capital. That's where you have to do all your business and your commercial paperwork. Now, let me point out something else since we're on the subject in the revised statutes. Section 51. If the usages, customs, rules, regulations, or other canons of any religious organization require that any subordinate body of that organization obtain the permission of any hierarch, archbishop, bishop, administrator, or other official or officials of the organization before incorporating. Such permission may be set forth in the affidavit provided for in Section 36 or Section 46B of this Act, whichever may be applicable as evidence of incorporation under this Act. I'm going to read that again if you didn't understand it, and then I'm going to break it down. If the usages, customs, rules, regulations, or canons of any religious organization require that any subordinate body, such as a subordinate temple, a subordinate school, anybody that you want to bring under the autonomous government of the Moorish Science Temple of America, if the usages, customs, rules, regulations, or canons of any religious organization require that any subordinate body of that organization obtain the permission of any hierarch, archbishop, bishop, administrator, or other official or officials of the organization before incorporating, such permission may be set forth in the affidavit provided for in Section 36 or 46B of this Act, whichever may be applicable as evidence of incorporation under this Act. And they're giving you two templates here. So what this is telling you is, going back to my original scenario, if I was in Alaska and I was trying to incorporate a subordinate temple, well, first amongst the bodies, we would elect our Grand Sheik, and we would come up with some articles of organization or articles of incorporation, and whatever we come up with will be subject, or it'll be in alignment with what Noble Drew Ali has set up in 1928, and then by the affidavit subscribed for in Section 36 or 46B of this Act, which is, here's an example of one, here's 36, they give you an example, and then you can go to the other one as the subordinate. So you just follow that sample, and then you take that affidavit and you go record it. You go record it, because it says whichever may be applicable, it says that is as evidence of incorporation under this Act. So I don't know, there it is right there. That's the evidence of incorporation of a subordinate temple. Now what you would do is you would simply take that affidavit that establishes that subordinate temple, you would go record it in Cook County, so now you would have it qualified as evidence of incorporation under this Act. You can keep that as a private record, or maybe you can contact Cook County and ask them, can you get a certificate of this incorporation? Maybe they may say they don't do it. You don't have to worry about that. Just keep it for your private record, because at this point, like I said, you can get the certificate of good standing. You have the private record, but the public record would be the articles of organization that you put on file in the state where you are organizing that subordinate temple. So I hope it clarifies, at least on a technical level, how that should be, how that could be done, and that process directly links you in. Because how does it link you in? Because when you follow all the paperwork in regards to the jurisdiction, it will link you directly back to the original filing of 1926, which was the civics organization, and it'll bring you back to the 1928, which is ratified in the positive law. And again, I guess I'll show that again. We already talked about it, but in any case where any church, congregation, or society formed for the purposes of religious worship has filed or caused to be filed prior to the effective date of this Act, this was done in 1963. I'm going to skip through it, but it basically says, when you get to the bottom of it, the incorporation of such church, congregation, or society and all its acts and transactions. This means even if we do a subordinate temple today, just the way that I described, it says, and all its acts and transactions which are otherwise legal are hereby declared validated and legal. So this is that positive enactment. See, Noble Drew Ali's affidavit was already a positive act based off of a legislated positive act. And then this is another ratification of an enactment in the positive law. So you see how that's done. Now that I touched on that, this right here is simply where you would go. I'm not even going to click on that right now because this is really not something that you should do. It's something that your this is something that your grand sheik should do, but you get that certificate of good standing. Now again, I'm just dropping this information out here, and hopefully the responsible people who need this information will get this information and do the right thing with it. All right. The last thing we're going to touch on, and y'all are going to love this. There's so much other stuff we didn't talk about, and this has gotten long enough. We didn't talk about the Vatican, city-state. We talked a little bit about the temporal powers. But this is the last thing I want to talk about. This is another reason why. See, okay, let's go ahead on down here. Let's go ahead on down here. Also, let me touch on this part too. Any true grand sheik, I believe, should, hear me out, you should have a seal for the Moorish Science Temple of America established in 1928. You should have a grand seal of the Moorish Science Temple of America established in 1928. And I'm certain you are authorized to use that seal because what we just showed you about the this is gonna get deep. Follow me now. And I'm excited about this. Right here, remember, I clicked this. Moorish Science Temple of America first used in commerce. Right? Why did I say it was first used in commerce? Let's click on it here. This is the trademark. I did right here because it says first used in commerce, 1928. So what am I trying to demonstrate here? It was first used in commerce in 1928, but it's registered as a collective membership, meaning what? That it's for indicating membership in a religious and civic organization, class 200. So this is a class dealing with political, civil status. By way of your association being a member of the Moorish Science Temple of America, a card-carrying member of the Moorish Science Temple of America, you are brought into this class, first used in 1928. Now, okay, this is the point that I wanted to make. So, if a true Grand Sheik could use this, because there may have been some discord about the not-for-profit incorporation of the Moorish Science Temple of America, but this trademark right here, this trademark, the Moorish Science Temple of America, as a term, has collective membership. So unless you're going to say someone's not a member of the Moorish Science Temple of America, anyone can use this. And I say that sparingly, maybe just because I can't find the right words. It kind of speaks for itself, but there's no individual ownership. And it's not about, it was incorporated as a collective ownership, collective membership, as you can see. So that's important. And something else that's important, and remember I said earlier that no one can covet the Moorish Science Temple of America. In the oral statements, it says Allah alone determines the fate of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Now, this also, you can click it right here. I found this, don't know who these people are, but I just want to mention, this was a lawsuit of a Frank L. Bay versus the Moorish Science Temple of America. And this was taken into a court. Well, basically what happened is, some kind of way, Frank L. Bay, there was a restraining order placed against him from referring to himself as an officer of the Moorish Science Temple of America, 1928. Is basically what we're talking about. I'm just paraphrasing. And he lost. But the great news about it is that by him, I'm sure at that time, and by others, it seemed as if someone was restricting their authority to associate or be an officer and use the Moorish Science Temple of America. Is looked at. They were trying to stop him from associating himself with the Moorish Science Temple of America as an officer. So to some, it would look like, I don't know the details, that there was a body trying to restrict the usage of what the prophet had set up. And at first, it was a loss. But then in the United States District Court, it was overturned. And basically, what I put here, this is my thought, if this ruling had not been overturned, it would have furthered the presumption that certain Moors of today can restrict the membership and exercise centralized control over the commercial affairs of Moorish Americans. In my opinion, the loss on appeal was a blow to the movement of those trying to keep the temple doors closed. I also believe that this patent agreement, as it is registered as collective membership, supports any Grand Sheik's authority to use the Moorish Science Temple of America. And that again is why I was saying, when it comes to for matters of nationalizing and nationality, all true Grand Sheiks, I believe, should have a seal for the Moorish Science Temple of America established in 1928. And this collective membership is the authority for you to use that marking when it comes for nationalizing. If you're a true Grand Sheik of the Moorish Science Temple of America. So I offer this research to you. You can click all of this stuff. It's in here. These links are active. So now, once again, we've seen, if you watched this whole thing to this point, and I hope you did, we know I want to talk about the authority in the body politic, which, remember, the Vatican City-State has a body politic. Why? Because there's multiple nationalities going on there. And if you don't have a nationality, you're accorded Roman citizenship. So that's a second-hand religious organization. Secular is what I would call it. However, the nation state, there is a nationality and everybody has one nationality. You know what I'm saying? So that's the difference in what's going on in the United States of America. You have the secular nation and the secular religion, which is the Christian religion, the Christian names, the Christian church, exercising what they would call temporal powers, but it's just powers of the Pope extending through the reign. And then you have the Moorish Science Temple of America for the L's and the Bays, and we're, truly waking up. And we see that Islamism is the faith, and it's built on the principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and that there's an autonomous government, and what we realize is this thing has already been completed. As a matter of fact, there's the case law, the rights concerning nationals of the United States in Morocco, which, when you understand that how election and domicile works, and that the Kingdom of Morocco is not geographical, then you really begin to understand that this is case law involving the United States and the French protectorate of the treaty, which is who's the protector of the treaty between the Moorish Americans and the United States government. They're the ones, the overlooker, the protector of the treaty. They play a role in it. There's already case law between the parties. It even deals with the nation state of those protected, which is the Moorish Americans, basically. But we have to stand in that government. So, but the point I'm making is these things already exist. These things already have been completed. Lastly, so we're going to try to close this out now. I want to talk about holding title in the Moorish Science Temple of America, or conveying property, conveying your real estate, or conveying your personal estate to the Moorish Science Temple of America. Hopefully, after this whole hour of what we discussed and having a better understanding of what a body politic is, it kind of shows why we want why we want our property to be under this ecclesiastical body in regard to the supreme law governing that title to that property. Because once again, when you're here in the United States of America, which to some degree is how can you put it, is Rome, I guess you will say that, based off of the reality of what's here, the system that has been set up. So in Rome, once again, if you do not have a nationality, you're accorded Roman citizenship. So once we correct our nationality matters, we want to make sure that all of our real and personal estate vest in the Moorish Science Temple of America, even as, if you're a United States citizen and you have property, your property is held in the United States of America, right? So it's the same type of thing. Now, some people will immediately think like, oh no, we don't want to do that because then the Moorish Science Temple of America is going to take my property and then I'm not going to have it anymore. Well, that's, if that's the type of temple that you're dealing with and, that's a problem, maybe you should seek out different leadership. But in reality, that's another thing why we talk about, here's something else I wanted to point out too. Talking about the trustees. Where is it at here? Yes, a trustee may be removed. A trustee includes grand sheiks and officers. A trustee may be removed from office wherever his office shall be declared, whenever his office shall be declared vacant for failure to act or for immoral conduct, or for abatement, etc. But basically, it's saying is basically so it's basically saying there is a procedure for removal. You know what I'm saying? And you shouldn't take this. You should make sure if you're going to do such a removal, it should be very well documented and fair. So also it says, in the articles, also you can, so when you're establishing a subordinate temple, which to some degree is a new temple, but remember we just read where it was talking about the old would become new, right? As far as the rights, benefits, title, interest, privilege, and all of that. But it's still telling you for this new subordinate temple, the way that you would establish trustees and successor trustees, you may do this in the Articles of Association, bylaws or canons, so this does, kind of lay that out. All right, so I guess that was enough to touch on, but yeah, so as I was trying to open up and I was trying to say, I hope you see how valuable it is to be able to nationalize your property. So now there's a such thing as nationalizing real and personal estate too, other than just your persons. Now, I really wish, I don't want to go on any further, but it would behoove you to Google the Illinois Hurds-smiths Revised Statutes for Religious Corporations Act and read down there, because there's some other things that talk about the persons and how title is held that directly deal with our persons and our estates. I just, you see this has went on long enough, so we got to cut it off somewhere. But the last thing I wanted to talk about, and we will just briefly talk about it right here, is this, right? The trustees of any corporation formed for religious purposes under Section 46A to 46H, inclusive of this Act, may receive land in the name of such corporation by gift, legacy, or purchase, and make and erect and build thereon such houses, buildings, or other improvements as may be necessary for the convenience and comfort of such congregation, church, society, or corporation. So the Moorish Science Temple of America can receive land. Now think about what happens when the Moorish Science Temple of America receives land and it's an autonomous government. Okay, any congregation, church, or society incorporated under this act may receive by grant or legacy real estate for the purpose of holding camp meetings and may make such improvements thereon as they may deem for their comfort and convenience. The title to such real estate shall be in such corporation subject to like conditions as are provided in this act in regard to other real estate. There's other things in here that you can read about that. Here's another one, as a matter of fact. Under Section 43, the trustee shall have the care and custody and control of the real and personal property of the corporation subject to the direction of the congregation, church, or society when directed. So to see what happens once you transfer, convey property to the Moorish Science Temple of America, which is its own person, the trustees have care, custody, and control. So this is equity. So now you're forcing the ecclesiastical, you're forcing the ecclesiastical laws to be considered in equity. You see what I'm saying? The ecclesiastical body politic and the organization, you know, because again, it's a religious corporation, it's incorporated. 46G. So now someone may say, well, I don't want to convey my property to the Moorish Science Temple of America because then they'll take it from me, right? So you can, you know, depending on however that temple runs, there may be an agreement constructed by where you become the trustee over that particular estate or that parcel of the estate. And you'll set that up just by records, documentations, and UCCs. Section 46G. Any ecclesiastical body or diocesan or like ecclesiastical officer may elect or nominate or appoint according to the usages, customs, rules as trustees who may become incorporated under Section 46A to 46K, inclusive of this act, and may take, hold, regulate, control, and dispose of any real, personal, or mixed property in and out of this state. The key is to note that it says in and or out of state. So that means no matter where you are, you can transfer estate, real and personal estate, to the Moorish Science Temple of America that Noble Drew Ali set up. This is a lot to read, so, and I kind of lost it somewhere. So you just have to read it on your own. But I was showing you can transfer property into the Moorish Science Temple of America and put it under that religious body politic jurisdiction. And again, and also what I believe it's saying here is the ecclesiastical body or the diocesan ecclesiastical officer, the grand sheet, when you transfer and convey property to the Moorish Science Temple of America, it says he may elect or nominate or appoint as trustees. So he can therefore turn around and appoint you as a trustee over that particular estate. You know, as long as you use it in accordance with the provisions of the temple, whatever that may be, maybe to free you up so you can uplift fallen humanity. Anyway, these are things to look at because this is all about construction and commerce, right? Here's a sample of what that would look like. I'm going to show this real quick in this video. This would be my original UCC one. Your brother, right? Sylvester D. Lamore Estate. You see Moore Eel, Sylvester D., Officer of the General Executor. Book entry, security, registration. I'm putting the registration of title on a certificate of live birth. So you basically see I have my L here, Memorandum of Trust, Moorish, American flag, Moore Eel, Sylvester D. then trustee under Declaration of Trust, dated. So you see, right, I'm already showing, demonstrating in my recording nationality, right? There's the estate. But I'm sorry, I kind of got off the track. Anyway, you see my filing there. This is just how it looks online, but rest assured, this is just a UCC1 financing statement. See who's the debtor, the all caps, who's the secured party, Moore L. Sylvester Deegan, trustee under Declaration of Trust, dated, right? That's who the secured party is, right? So who's the secured party? Now, what is the jurisdiction? What is the jurisdiction of domicile for all of this, right? So obviously, I didn't use a postal code and all of that. So what I'm showing is this is my original secured party filing. Secured, I use that term loosely, but I've secured my estate in trust as a Moorish American national, right? Why am I using a UCC? Because corporations use UCCs. The Secretary of State uses UCCs. The same Secretary of State that is in alignment with all Secretary of States. The same Secretary of State that acknowledges other Secretary of States' laws as laws. The same Secretary of State that acknowledges the Hurds-smiths revised statute as laws. The same Secretary of State that acknowledged the Moorish Science Temple of America is a religious corporation established on the record. That's law. So it's all linked in. So this is why I say, yes, you should use the UCC, because the way that corporations register titles in commerce is the UCC. And the Moorish Science Temple of America is a religious corporation. So it's just something to consider. Anyways, that was like my original filing. And then, So how would I convey that? So now the idea is I want to convey that original filing to the Moorish Science Temple of America, kind of sort of what we just talked about. This is just a prototype. And again, I share this research, you know. So here's what example of that UCC will look like. So this is a UCC 3. So you just seen the original record, right? So this is a financing statement amendment. So this box is checked. Hope you can see that. That's an amendment. So this box is checked. Slide it over here. Initial financing statement. That's where you put your initial financing statement number. Party or information change. Yes, there's a party or information change. Why? Because we're adding a secured party. Who's a secured party? The Moorish Science Temple of America. Because the secured party is really what? Just an account holder. They're the account holder for this estate. That's why we're conveying it to the Moorish Science Temple of America. Now again, this is just a notice. So the UCC is not actually doing a conveyance. It's an indexing or a registering or a record keeping of the conveyance. So there's a party or information change. Check one of the boxes. The change affects what? The secured party. Check one of the boxes. We adding a name. We're not changing a name here. Follow. Make sure you read this and pay attention to it. It's self-explanatory. You're adding a secured party because who's the first secured party? Doe L. John Alex under declaration of trust dated whatever. That's the secured party when you secure the estate in trust. Now that you're conveying it, transferring it, gifting, or by legacy transferring the estate to the Moorish Science Temple of America, you will add them as a secured party. And you're not going to take yourself off as a secured party because hopefully they're going to, in return, convey it back to you and make you a trustee for a specific purpose, right? So look at the collateral statement here. This is registration regarding the grant and bequest of property in fee simple absolute for religious use declared in the last will and testament of the testator of the debtor to transfer the full title with all rights and interests to the land tenements, blah, blah, blah. It's just putting something in there. But the key thing that you can pay attention to is because I read the Hurds-smiths revised statute and I understand the importance of a will and holding title to property, I felt, well, the strongest way that I can transfer this estate to the Moorish Science Temple of America is by bequest, right? Because it's just another deed. It's just another form of transfer. But a bequest may be a codicil to your will. So that may be attachment to the will and testament that you've recorded. You can bequest property to the Moorish Science Temple of America in any certain way as a codicil to your will, and then you're going to put that in an even higher class or standing. Read the Hurds-smiths revised statutes and you can see more of that. So it's a way of nationalizing. Here's an example of what this would look like. We got to start from the bottom up. This would be the example of a deed, right? I call it a deed of transfer. Say if this was me, I'm trying to put some real estate, I'm going to transfer it to the Moorish Science Temple of America. I call it a deed of transfer because I've read the county indexing recording manuals and I know that a document can be indexed by two titles. So one, I call it a deed of transfer, and the next one I'm going to call it a codicil. This codicil is going to relate to the first codicil number. This SK is the safekeeping number of where the testator's last will and testament is on record. You know what I'm saying? So naturally, since this is a codicil, I want to have two witnesses down here because it's serving two purposes. It's a codicil and it's a conveyance and it's a bequest. So that's the type of conveyance to the Moorish Science Temple of America, right? I believe that's the proper type of way to do it. So this is just an idea of how I would do this. This I would record in my county. I hereby grant and bequest in accord with the last will and testament dated whatever, all title rights and interests to the lands, tenements, remainders, and hereditaments whatsoever and wheresoever situated, including the real and personal estate held as collateral annexed to the UCC1. This UCC1, this transfer statement will attach directly to my UCC1. This is kind of like the instrument that I would execute, the physical county record instrument that I would execute to transfer this estate. Now, once I transfer that estate, my entire estate, which will basically be my secured party creditor, UCC1 and everything in it, then my divine grand sheik, hopefully my grand body will, and it don't have to be done by this. I'm real like, it don't have to be done like this. It could be any form, but he would give a form of acknowledgement and acceptance and appointment of trustee for specific property. So what he's going to be doing is acknowledging and accepting your conveyance, your gift, or your bequest of property to the Moorish Science Temple of America. He's going to be putting his acknowledgement acceptance on it, and in the same document, he's going to be appointing you as a special trustee or specific trustee over this specific estate, giving you powers to exchange, barter, trade, negotiate, increase, and make judgment calls, judgment determinations in regard to that estate. So hopefully your Grand Sheik will acknowledge this, sign this, seal it. You will acknowledge it, sign it, and seal it. So what you would have here is your codicil, your conveyance of your security filing, your entire estate to the Moorish Science Temple of America, that the acknowledgement, affirmation, and making you the trustee by the Grand Sheik. And this is kind of just what it would look like. Simply here, the name of the secured party: Doe L. John Alex under declaration of trust. The added information, the organization name is the Moorish Science Temple of America. You know, it's just the way that I would do it. It's just an idea. It's a thought. It's a way that you can do this. And yeah, so cool. I'm gonna tap out, yo. This was a long one.